Eaton County Sheriff's Department received a phone call from Christina, who stated she was in fear for her life. A man was texting from outside of her apartment.
She told us she had been in a relationship with him and she was scared that he was going to find her and do God knows what.
She said just days prior to this incident, the suspect abused her to where a personal protection order was granted.
She relayed information about being choked, being thrown to the ground. He had made statements to her that he would slit her throat while she was sleeping, in addition to her young son's throat. Kiernan was an active parolee. He had been to prison for an assault involving strangulation. He was known to be violent toward women.
Now Kiernan stopped by her apartment and was outside. Our patrol deputies get called in to the scene to get her out of the house and make sure that she is safe.
First and foremost, we make sure that she was safe. At that point, I instructed all of my deputies to go to that area in an attempt to locate Kiernan. We were very concerned and alarmed that he may be violent again. When he sent the message stating, "See, you brought friends to the party," and it brought a level of, is he going to harm us as well? Where is he? Is he going to shoot us without us knowing? Is he going to ambush us? We absolutely believe that he was a danger and most likely was in possession of some sort of weapon. We were actively and methodically trying to find him to the best of our ability.
Pull over. All units, hold you.
This is the Eaton County Sheriff's Office! Shut your vehicle off and put your keys out the window! Put your hands up! Hands up! Step out of the vehicle! Face away from me! Walk backwards to the sound of my voice! Keep coming, keep your hands up!
They got him out of the car, took him into custody on the side of the road. He was very cavalier, not a care in the world.
Hey, where are you from? Yeah. We want to tow your car. The closest one down here would be like Countryside out of Charlotte or Davis out of Charlotte.
Maybe I should probably look on my phone on the camera.
Gotta be honest with you, dude. I don't care.
I took that as, okay, he wants to show me the messages that his girlfriend sent and how mean she is. Or she's the one contacting me. I'm just innocent here.
Well, it'll be the bodies of the two people I murdered tonight.
Okay. So you killed a couple people tonight?
Yeah.
Where was that at?
Look on my phone.
Okay. Good. Where's his phone at?
It's an emergency to check it.
Eddie said to look at his phone on the camera. Oh boy.
What the hell?
Yeah,
As soon as I pulled up the photos, I could start seeing the horrific images of two females. And it appeared that they were murdered. It was heinous, gruesome. There's wounds and blunt force trauma. It's very difficult to kind of wrap our mind around what we were seeing. Is this real? Is this something he just got off the internet and he's playing a trick on us?
No police agency had even gotten a call that there was a potential homicide or crime scene. We didn't have any information yet.
What's this saying?
I don't know, dude. Okay, can you step over here for me, sir, please? I'm gonna have you have a seat right in the back seat here, okay?
My approach was casual. I wanted to do my best to keep an easygoing conversation between us, even though we were talking about something so horrific.
What's your first name? Kiernan, is that how you pronounce Kiernan? I don't want to pronounce it incorrectly. You're a smart guy, I'm sure. Right? Pretty intelligent? Yeah. Okay. Where are those people at, man?
Yeah, let me out, I'll tell you. My back hurts.
I'm sorry, what? I couldn't hear you, buddy, with all this.
I'll tell you my back hurts. I can't go nowhere.
Yeah, go ahead and stand out here if that's... Watch your step, man. Okay. You okay?
Yeah.
All right. Where are they at?
One of them is in the place I was just at. Nights in East Lansing.
Nights in East Lansing?
Room 215. She's in the bathtub.
Okay. Nights in
The other
room 215 in East Lansing.
is in Dorchester Apartments. Somewhere.
Okay. Nights in East Lansing. No. And who's at the Nights in East Lansing? Who is that?
Julie Mooney.
Julie Mooney?
Yeah.
Okay. And then on Dorchester, what's that person's name?
Kaylee.
As I spoke with Kiernan, he's telling me in that same demeanor where this is just a regular day for him. There is no physiological reaction from him that he was under stress, that his heart was racing, that he was afraid, that he was questioning what was going to happen to him. He was just very direct. I have never encountered anything like this.
When deputies arrived at the scene, it was dark, it was very early in the morning, and they approached it with caution. It could potentially be a very dangerous situation for them to walk into. Deputies had their guns drawn. We didn't know if there was still a suspect outstanding or what they were going to encounter. Deputies made entry, and they located Julie Mooney deceased in that hotel room.
Julie Mooney was left in a bathtub. She had cutting wounds and blunt force trauma.
It was a very horrific crime scene. Senior investigators were affected by what they saw. They had simply never seen anything like that.
Julie was a caring and giving person. She gave a lot. She gave her heart, and she loved her daughters. And she really wanted to become a social worker. She had these aspirations of a person who was working to help people. Julie participated in 3 or 4 mission trips. She rebuilt some poverty-stricken homes. Julie was very musical. She and her friend, they started the flag corps for the marching band. They did all of the choreographing to the music with the band director and all of that. I really miss her. She was a good daughter. My home is lonely.
We responded to the address, and once we made our announcements and didn't hear anything inside, we went ahead and opened the door, which was unlocked. We enter, we make more announcements. We still didn't get any response inside.
They cleared the first floor and then went upstairs.
And then turning to my left appeared to be a bedroom door. And that's when I went ahead and opened that bedroom door. As soon as I opened that door, you could see a female subject that was laying face down in the bed. Her head and the pillow was soaked in blood. She suffered a pretty serious head injury from what we could observe, as well as she had multiple lacerations all over her body. It was very evident that this was in fact a homicide. We had approximate weight, eye, hair color, things like that. We were able to look up in our programs, everything was matching up that this was in fact Kaylee Brock.
When I found out that Kaylee was murdered, I was in shock. I had so much shock that somebody would do this to such a sweet and innocent soul. I was sad. I was angry. It was really hard to believe and grasp. Kaylee was very much a people person. Her smile just lit up the room, and everybody loved her. Kaylee loved cooking, and she loved watching the Rachel Ray shows. And she loved reading and going to craft shows with her family. She still had so much life left.
Detective Kramer from Kingdom County. Detective Sergeant Bart Crane from Meridian Township. Because he confessed on the side of the road doesn't implicate him in everything. There's still a lot of details needed from the investigative side to lock him into a statement, to prove that it was him.
We didn't know. Was he in collusion with somebody else? Was there more than 2 victims? And you got to be on your A game to get out of them what you need them to say. Right now, the most critical part of this investigation is get him talking.
Start with, where are you from? You live local here somewhere? Yeah. You're on a parole detainer, so you're on parole, I assume? Tell us what happened. What yesterday?
Yesterday.
Tell me what happened with Kaylee. When did you go over there yesterday?
I don't know what time.
What led to the altercation that you had?
When you see a forensics van outside, you know that, something, drastic has happened.
Sheriff's officials say deputies found the 2 women killed, one in Holt and the other in Meridian Township. A man from Eaton County was arrested early this morning after an old girlfriend called police. During the arrest, he told deputies he had pictures to show them of the 2 women he killed.
I was running errands. When I got home, there were police cars in my driveway. And my husband was on the front porch with one of the officers at that time. And I was told that Julie had been murdered. I was running a horror story through my head, and I couldn't believe the horror story I had in my head could have been any worse than what actually happened.
You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to talk to anyone. You do not have to answer any of my questions. You ever seen that way? What about, what's the girl's name that's in the hotel room?
Julie?
What about Julie? Did you have an altercation with Julie?
No. No altercation.
During the traffic stop, he was pretty open that he had just murdered a couple of people.
Maybe I should probably look on my phone on the camera. It'll be the bodies of the 2 people I murdered tonight.
That little bit of time that he sat in a jail cell leading up to it changed the demeanor drastically.
We thought he changed his mind, or he just decided he was going to play a game with us and stop talking.
Now, he refused to make eye contact. He was in a very defensive, kind of shelled position. So I was trying to keep my line of questioning soft, my tone calm and quiet. I wanted to mimic his tone to keep building a rapport and switch the topic to get him to open up. Who is this girl that you know that lives here in Delta?
Christina?
Christina? Who is she? Wife, girlfriend?
Girlfriend?
So what led you to her apartment yesterday?
I just wanted to see if she was home.
Did you call her or knock on her door or anything?
No. You text her though. She's whining in cuffs now. I know she called the police. I was going to give her money. I wasn't going to need it. And decided it wasn't a good idea. But the only thing I would have done was scare her.
You didn't want to scare her?
Yeah. I love her. But I had issues. That's why we didn't work out. I was kind of mad because, like, she said I hurt her and her son. I never hurt her son. Did I hurt her? Yeah, you can hurt the dog. Of course. I never hurt her son.
It sounds like your girlfriend is a good person. She was keeping you based a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But things went bad. It just kind of changed for you.
Mm-hmm. Something inside of me snapped.
This is the first time that he really started talking on his own. He opened up rather than one-word answers. I knew that if I can keep him comfortable, he's going to continue to talk with me. The next direction to go was we needed to figure out how Kaylee and Julie ended up victims.
Oh, you know Kaylee and Julie.
Mm-hmm. Julie only a couple months. Co-worker.
What about Kaylee? Where do you know her from?
I just known her from church years ago.
So what led you to Kaylee's apartment yesterday?
I just went over there.
She let you in? And then what happened when you got inside?
We just talked.
What'd you guys talk about?
I told her I was going to leave and submit myself tonight. Submit myself to get mentally evaluated.
Why are you trying to submit yourself to get mentally evaluated? Do you have it on your time or something?
Yeah, as you can tell, I got a lot wrong with me. But I guess it was too late.
You mean too late? What do you mean by that?
This damage is done. You know, it's like saying myself. It's like I talk to myself. I'll sit there and just be like, just had a full-fledged deep conversation for a whole half hour. It's a voice in my head. But it's not like it's more of a thought. It's not a voice.
Right. So have you been battling that thought or voice
all my life?
He was very difficult to deal with. And it seemed like he was playing games with us. I had to get every potential detail out of him before he shut down. It was pretty direct, pointed questions from then on.
Tell me what happened with Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you killed Kaylee.
With the hammer.
Where in Kaylee's apartment did you kill her?
In her bedroom.
What the hammer look like?
It's a ball pen. Point.
What happened?
I told her I'd give her a massage. That's what I was doing. And then I grabbed the hammer out of my bag. And I just slammed the hammer into her head.
In the head?
Mm-hmm. It was like one blow and that was it.
Did you just surprise him with the hammer?
I don't know.
I guess it's just... If you were to come to my house and bring a hammer, it would make me go, huh.
You didn't know I had.
Did you have a bag or something that you brought in?
Yeah.
What else is in the bag?
Just the knives. That's it.
Did you use a knife at all?
Yeah. I had cut it. That's it.
Okay. How long did you stay there after you killed her?
15 minutes.
That was a very difficult confession for us to get. Once I got him to admit to killing Kaylee, it was a matter of delicately withdrawing the facts about Julie. You don't want to trigger any remorse, regret, anything in him to think that he shouldn't be talking.
And then drive straight to Julie's, or did you go somewhere in between?
I went to the hotel.
Straight from Kaylee's apartment to the hotel? How long was it that you were at the hotel before Julie got there?
She was there before me. She was waiting in her car. She wasn't actually going to come. So I told Julie I was going to pack my bags. And I was going to get submitted tonight.
So, I just want to make sure I have this clear. You go to Kaylee's apartment, kill her, drive straight to the motel room. Julie's waiting for you in the parking lot. Tell me about the hotel room when you got there with Julie. You guys just hang out for a little bit, or what happened?
Yeah, we just hung out.
What were you doing?
She just kept watching me, overly watching me, for some reason. And she sat down in a chair on the top. You know, I was like, all right. And then I went over behind her and I hit her with my hand.
What part of her head did you hit? So you're behind her and she turns this way?
No, I hit the back of her head. Her head snapped forward.
Did you lay her down on the floor or did she fall out of the chair?
No, I thought I hit her a whole bunch more times. And so she fell out of the chair.
And that's when you cut her?
Yeah.
It's very shocking as an investigator to have somebody willing to answer pointed questions with zero remorse. I was looking in the eyes of just pure evil. But if at any point in this we would have shown our disgust or our anger, you don't know how that would have affected him. And so us remaining calm and emotionless was key to allow him to keep talking.
Did you put her in the bathtub? Take her from the...
Yeah, dragged her.
Into the bathroom?
Yeah.
How'd you get her in there?
Blanket. Put a blanket beneath her and dragged the blanket.
Did you leave the blanket there?
No, yeah, I left it in the bathtub.
Did you take anything from Kaylee or from Julie? Take anything with you?
I did, actually. I took her hair clip. Julie's.
What did that look like?
It's just a little hair clip. Got me from Kaylee.
Do you know why you took those?
Just memory of me. It's like souvenir.
We had a solid confession. Next, it was very important for us to show he was perfectly competent while planning it and perfectly competent while executing it.
Suspects can be crafty, and they'll come back and say, well, I was crazy that night, or I didn't know what I was doing. Kiernan could be planting the seed about being insane at the time.
I needed to shut down a future insanity defense. So the more intimate details that I could get him to give me was all to show he very clearly intended to do this strategically with a purpose and not get caught.
Say anything before they know that anything was going to happen?
No.
There was no argument or altercation or anything?
No.
Or was that what you thought you were going to do when you went there?
No.
Were they bad people?
No. Really wasn't. She was just trying to help me.
You're obviously fighting some demons, man. You have been for a long time, it sounds like. Right? When you're doing this, you killed him with the hammer. Did that make you feel better when you did that? Or why did you do that?
No, it didn't make me feel better.
Okay. Did it make you feel worse? Just didn't feel it.
I didn't feel anything.
This was a difficult interview. You know what he's done and you know what he's capable of. And it was kind of like pulling teeth to get anything out of him.
Sometimes there's a cat and mouse game, right? I'm not just going to come out and say it. You're going to have to get it out of me. But the more you can keep him talking about what he did that night, then we're winning in that interview.
Has your feelings always been to do it like with a knife or with a hammer, with a weapon?
The weapon's choice was a hammer, I guess.
Where did you get the hammer from?
I went and bought it
When?
a couple of years ago.
Is that the only thing you bought there?
No, I bought knives.
How many knives did you buy?
2.
So was at that point you knew you were going to do something?
Yeah.
Did you clean the knives off between the two?
Yeah. I cleaned up everything and then,
What do you mean you cleaned up everything?
like, I wiped it down and stuff.
You mean the room or the...
Yeah, it was kind of messy.
What did you use to clean it up?
Just towels.
Did you leave them there or did you just get rid of them?
I left them there.
Then what happened?
I actually drove back to Kaylee's apartment. My mind kept playing with me like she's alive or something, so I wanted to make sure she was dead. Almost as if she wouldn't be there when I got back.
And what did you do when you went back in the second time?
I took her phone. I threw it out on the road. I threw her and Julie's phone out.
Both at the same place?
In case somebody called looking for them.
It just showed that he calculated the steps, the risks. And it was just one more cognitive step that he made to cover up, process, and continue this killing spree. We shut down that avenue of, I blacked out, I don't know what happened. He didn't lose all cognitive abilities, and he knew leading up to this what he was going to do. We located the backpack in his car that contains our murder weapons, both the hammer and a folding knife that was used. All of the weapons had been cleaned, but still had DNA on them. We also received surveillance video from the hotel.
The video at the Night's Inn showing both him and Julie is extremely significant, puts him with Julie at the time of the murder. It also takes away any chance that anyone else was involved. We also had video of Kiernan buying murder weapons at one of the local grocery stores. The biggest thing is just showing the intent, showing the planning. There was no other reason to buy those things at that time in his life, so it was clearly that he was preparing to commit murder.
Is it okay with you if I look at these pictures that are on your phone?
It's my coworker, Julie.
Seemed to kind of perk up when he heard the videos play. His body language and posture and everything changed, almost where he was proud of his work and what he had done. He was demonic, like a sociopath, making me question, are there more victims?
Ever thought about doing this before tonight? Since I've been young.
You've had this thoughts since you were young?
You ever acted on them before?
No.
Just these two?
It's like this. Recently, things spiraled out of control, and something inside of me snapped. It actually started like, it's like, yeah, I might be crazy, but I was standing next to Julie the other day, and like, I just wanted to kill her, you know? It was like a strongest desire I've ever had. It was weird.
The disturbing part about it is this is when he's becoming the most open. This is when he's elaborating more. This is when he's comfortable talking, is getting into these dirty secrets that he's had his whole life.
It's like something inside of me took over. I don't know.
You've had this before, but it felt different.
I had it before, yeah. The girl that I went to prison over.
But you didn't follow through on that one.
No.
What did you go to prison for?
Strangulation.
Was there going to be any more?
Just planning on try getting other people to come with. So
do you think plan on keeping people coming in and you're just going to keep putting them in the bathroom?
yeah. Until the smell started, it had like this copper smell to it, you know? It's metallic. Just like what the books say. I'd never understood that until I experienced it myself. Just had this, you know?
Is there a list of people you wanted to kill?
Just tried to get at least 4.
Why was 4 the number?
I don't know. Guess it's just a goal. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not like I'm using a gun.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot involved in it. It's personal.
You know that he wants to talk about what he did. If it's been on a psychopath's mind for so long, you're going to want to play on that and you're going to want to delve into it.
Another girl at my work. She tries to help me too. But she struggles with a lot of demons as well. I think I would have killed her differently.
How do you think you would have done it?
But she's the girl that I always wanted to have sex with. You know, smoking her girls.
Mm-hmm. But do you think you would have actually killed her differently, like not with a hammer? Or what do you mean by that?
There probably would have been a sexual component of her.
Did you talk to Kennedy at all yesterday?
Yeah, you text her.
She was sick.
When Kiernan started talking about the other people he was intending to target that night, that was bone-chilling. It was important to identify who those individuals were and physically make contact to make sure that they were alive.
Still in my class.
Why her?
I guess she wrestles with a lot of demons as well.
How'd you get a hold of her?
Facebook Messenger.
Is that how you communicated with Kaylee and Julie?
Yeah.
I opened Kiernan Brown's phone and I pulled up his Facebook and located the friends by the names that he'd given me and began sifting through the text messages with his intended victims.
One of them he had sent a text message to and asked if he could come over and sleep on her couch. The other one he sent text message to was a classmate of his.
She was a single mother who borrowed a book from him, and Kiernan, in his ploy, stated that he needed the book back. I sent those profiles out to the team outside to find those individuals.
As we got the information, we call it run code, lights and sirens. We had as fast as we could determine where these young ladies lived, get there as quick as we could. There's potentially 2 young ladies that had been harmed or even murdered by this guy.
We have the 3 teams out trying to find and identify these 2 other intended victims. My goal was to continue digging through the details that I needed for the case.
How long were you over at Christina's for?
5 minutes.
You didn't have any intentions of killing her?
No. I love her.
What makes her different?
She was just pure.
When you left Christina's, where did you go?
I just got in the car and just took off.
Where were you headed?
Chicago.
Do you know anybody in Chicago?
Large city, though.
You were off to Chicago, and that's when you got stopped.
Yeah.
Was your plan for just heading out of a bigger city? Traveling down?
I was trying to get there first. And the town was really, it was going to be a well-large city.
It's just for any person.
Mm-hmm. I know, I remember something when I was 18, and one of my sisters in Illinois, one night I just took a knife. I tried to hunt people down. It didn't work out.
Why didn't it work out?
Couldn't find a person with the right settings. Wasn't as determined, I guess.
Ever told anybody about that before?
No. So what would you guys call me? Serial killer.
I just think you need some help, bro.
Yeah, I do.
That's what I think.
But it's coming too late, you know.
It's never too late for help.
I don't think they have hospitals anymore. I think you just have a person.
When he asked me if I thought he was a serial killer, he was looking for that. He wanted that reputation, that title. And it was important for me not to give him that credit and not make him as glorified as he thought he was.
Is there anything else that you can think of to help us get all this stuff cleaned up? Any other messages, notes, weapons, bloody clothes?
No.
At that point, we ended the interrogation. We had everything we needed, and personally, we couldn't tolerate the vile nature of the things he was saying any longer.
We'll run you back upstairs and might come shout at you again if we think anything else, okay?
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
When we walked out of the interview, we were certain that we had a solid confession. He was perfectly competent while planning it, perfectly competent while executing it, and perfectly competent while providing us details.
The other potential victims that were named by Kiernan were ultimately located and found to be safe. One of them he had sent a text message to and asked if he could come over and sleep on her couch. She just flat out said no.
The other one he sent text messages to told me she was asleep and didn't see them, and had she not fallen asleep, would have left to get him that book because she felt bad that she still had it. He was lining them up for the night, and luckily the two victims didn't respond the way he wanted.
We can't say enough about the incredible police work done by the Eaton County Sheriff's Office. I don't think there's any doubt that the suspect was on a killing spree, and his quick capture probably saved many lives.
While in jail, Kiernan Brown altered his appearance by tattooing his entire face.
It's almost like he's trying to really show the world what he's like on the inside. He really looks like the monster that he is.
You killed because you are evil. You came from behind because you are a coward. If you weren't, you would have killed yourself just like you told Julie you were thinking about. You leave our family and friends with undescribable grief.
You took two individuals who all they wanted to do was provide help to you. You embody hate and selfishness and cruelty.
Ultimately, Kiernan Brown pled guilty and received a 70 to 100-year sentence, which puts him at 100 years old at his first available chance of parole.
The interrogation in this case was really difficult. There's no one size fits all when it comes to interviews. You need to be really good at reading people, reading both verbal and nonverbal body skills to get to the truth. Detective Kramer did a really good job with Kiernan Brown and getting out of him exactly what he had done.
This is the most gruesome and emotionally difficult cases that I've gone through in my career. Being able to eliminate people like Kiernan Brown just solidify and motivate me to keep doing what we do every day.
The world is missing a very special person. It is very hard to believe and grasp. Kaylee had a motto, let the light lift you up, and she did live by that. We would have bad days, and Kaylee definitely helped lift us up.
I had a sensation come over me a couple of days after she passed. I was in the kitchen, and I felt her arms around me. And it was just like some other time when she'd had her arms around me. It just felt that way. A couple of friends had dreams of Julie, and Julie says she's fine. I don't know how I feel about spirits, but I know I'll see her again.
The first sound anyone remembers is the phone ringing, sharp and insistent, cutting through the thick Texas night like a blade. It is 2:17 a.m. in the summer of 1995, the kind of hour when the world feels paused, when even the highways seem to hold their breath. On the other end of the line, a dispatcher's voice is flat, professional, stripped of emotion by repetition. But the words themselves carry weight, heavy and irreversible. A body has been found. A woman, mid-30s, rural county road outside a town most people only pass through. No witnesses waiting, no suspect in sight, just heat, insects, and a silence that already feels wrong. By the time the first patrol car arrives, the night air is thick enough to taste. Red and blue lights spill across tall grass, illuminating a shape that does not belong there. She lies near the edge of the asphalt, one shoe missing, the other twisted at an angle that suggests a struggle. Her car is parked half a mile away, driver's door open, interior light dead, keys gone. The officers step carefully, boots crunching on gravel, radios murmuring codes that will later blur together in reports and transcripts. They do not know her name yet, but they know enough to understand this will not be simple. This is not an accident. This is a crime that will refuse to explain itself. The sun rises fast in Texas, harsh and unforgiving. By dawn, the road is closed, yellow tape fluttering weakly in the breeze, and the body is gone, replaced by chalk marks and dark stains that soak into the ground like secrets. Word spreads through town the way it always does, faster than the official statements, faster than facts. A waitress mentions it over coffee. A gas station attendant lowers his voice when a customer asks why the sheriff's cruiser is parked sideways across County Road 12. By noon, everyone knows something terrible happened, but no one knows exactly what, and that uncertainty becomes its own kind of fear. Her name is eventually released, Laura Bennett. A local, a mother, a woman who worked 2 jobs and still managed to show up at school events, church fundraisers, community picnics. The kind of person people describe as normal, which in moments like this really means predictable, safe, not someone you expect to see on the evening news. Her photograph appears on television screens that night, pulled from a family album, smiling under a bright sky, unaware of the story it will one day tell without her consent. Detectives reconstruct her last known hours with the tools they have. Phone records, receipts, the quiet testimony of people who saw her without realizing it mattered. She left work just after 10 p.m. She stopped for gas. She spoke briefly with a coworker in the parking lot, complaining about the heat. She was supposed to be home by 11. She never made it. Somewhere between routine and disappearance, something intervened, something violent enough to end her life and careful enough to leave almost nothing behind. The autopsy provides answers that raise more questions. Cause of death: strangulation. No defensive wounds that clearly identify an attacker, no obvious weapon. Time of death estimated within a window so wide it feels almost useless. Evidence technicians bag fibers, photograph marks, scrape under fingernails, all with the quiet urgency of people who know time is already working against them. DNA is collected, carefully preserved, logged, sealed. In 1995, it feels like a promise, a future solution waiting patiently in a box. The investigation surges forward with the energy of a fresh crime. Friends and family are interviewed, then interviewed again. Ex-partners are scrutinized. Co-workers are questioned. Tips flood in, some earnest, some malicious, some born entirely from imagination. A man who drives a blue pickup. A stranger seen near the gas station. A scream someone thinks they heard but cannot place in time. Detectives pin photographs to corkboards, draw lines between names, circle possibilities in red marker. For a while, it feels like progress. But days turn into weeks, and the momentum falters. Alibis hold. Witnesses recant or fade into uncertainty. The blue pickup is traced to 3 different men, none of whom can be placed near the scene. The gas station's security camera malfunctioned that night, the tape blank where answers might have been. Each lead collapses under scrutiny, leaving behind frustration and a growing sense that the truth is slipping further away with every passing hour. The town changes in subtle ways. Porch lights stay on longer. Parents insist on walking their children home even in daylight. Conversations lower when strangers enter the room. Laura's name becomes shorthand for a shared anxiety, a reminder that safety is an illusion maintained by habit and hope. Her family retreats into a private grief that plays out in public spaces, at candlelight vigils and press conferences where they ask for help, for information, for anything that might explain why. Months pass, then a year. The file grows thicker, heavier, harder to lift from the shelf. New detectives review old notes, re-interview old witnesses, hoping fresh eyes will see what others missed. They don't. The evidence remains stubbornly silent. The DNA profile sits in storage, unmatched, a string of numbers and letters that points nowhere. The case is officially classified as unsolved, a cold case in everything but temperature, because in Texas, the heat never really leaves. Time does what it always does. It moves on, indifferent. Laura's children grow older, their memories of her shifting from vivid to impressionistic. Detectives retire, transfer, pass away. The road where she was found is repaved, the stains erased, the chalk long washed away. New crimes take priority. New victims demand attention. The Bennett case becomes a reference point, a lesson in police academies about how even straightforward lives can end in inexplicable violence. And yet, the evidence remains. A sealed box, labeled and catalogued, sitting in an evidence room that smells faintly of dust and disinfectant. Inside it, the DNA waits, unchanged by years of neglect or advances in science. It does not age. It does not forget. It simply exists, a silent witness to a moment that altered countless lives and then receded into the background noise of history. When technology advances, when databases expand, when old cases are reopened with new tools and renewed determination, that box will be lifted again, its contents brought into the light. But for now, in this moment, in 1995, the story ends the way so many do, not with answers but with absence. A woman gone, family shattered, a town left listening for footsteps in the dark, wondering if the person responsible is still out there, living an ordinary life, carrying an extraordinary secret. The night Laura Bennett died does not end. It stretches forward, year after year, replayed in the minds of those who loved her and those who failed to save her. It becomes a permanent fixture in the collective memory, a cold case not because it lacks heat, but because the fire that once drove the search has burned down to embers, waiting for something, anything, to make it flare again. The heat never really left that summer, it just sank deeper into the asphalt and waited, and every time a cruiser rolled past the house on Cedar Hollow Drive the pavement seemed to breathe it back up, a low shimmer rising around the tires like the case itself refusing to cool down. because by the second week after the body was found the neighborhood had stopped pretending this was a tragedy that belonged to someone else. Curtains twitched longer, dogs barked at nothing, and people who had lived side by side for a decade suddenly realized they had no idea what their neighbors did after dark. And inside the temporary command post set up in a converted municipal office, the walls were already crowded with photographs, timelines, maps, strings of red yarn crossing and recrossing like veins. Because the initial shock had passed and now the work had begun, the slow grinding work of turning grief into data and hope into procedure, starting with the last known hours of the victim's life. Routine so ordinary it felt obscene to dissect it frame by frame, leaving work just after 5, stopping at the grocery store for milk and bread, a receipt time-stamped and bagged as evidence, waving to the cashier who would later say she remembered nothing unusual, just another face in line, just another customer complaining about the heat, and then the drive home, a route taken hundreds of times before, familiar enough to lull the mind into wandering, which is what made the gap so terrifying. That stretch of time between leaving the store and never arriving home, a black hole that swallowed minutes and then hours, and when detectives drove the same route they noted every turn, every blind spot, every patch of road where a car could pull over without being seen, every place where a person could disappear in plain sight, and the theory mill began to spin almost immediately: robbery gone wrong, crime of opportunity, someone the victim knew, someone who followed her, someone who waited. Each idea pinned up and examined, prodded for weakness, because the first rule of a fresh homicide is that the simplest answer is usually right until it isn't, and the simplest answer started to crumble as soon as the autopsy report came in, clinical language delivered like a blow, cause of death confirmed, time window narrowed, and evidence that suggested control, not chaos, a scene that spoke of intention rather than panic, which shifted the tone in the room, voices dropping, pens pausing. Mid-scratch, because intention meant planning, and planning meant a different kind of predator, one who knew what they were doing, one who might do it again. Witness canvases spread outward like ripples, officers knocking on doors under the same punishing sun, asking the same questions again and again. Did you hear anything? See anything? Notice a strange car? And most answers were no, or maybe, or I'm not sure, the fog of memory already thickening. But a few details stuck. A late-night argument heard through an open window, a car idling too long at the curb, headlights cutting across a bedroom wall at an odd hour. Fragments that on their own meant nothing, but together began to suggest a pattern, or at least the illusion of one. And in the evidence room the physical artifacts of the crime were laid out with almost reverent care, clothing sealed in bags, fibers catalogued, a single hair that did not belong to the victim, caught on fabric like a whisper, logged and stored with the hope that science might one day be able to make it speak. Though in 1995 that hope was still fragile, DNA analysis expensive, slow, often inconclusive, a promise. More than a solution, and yet even then detectives knew enough to preserve everything, to keep the boxes sealed, because cases had a way of coming back from the dead when technology caught up to patience. Interviews grew more intense as the initial pool of sympathy narrowed into suspicion. Friends, co-workers, ex-partners all sitting under fluorescent lights, voices recorded, statements compared, timelines cross-checked down to the minute, and each inconsistency was circled in red, not as proof but as possibility, because grief does strange things to memory, and lies can look like confusion if you want them to, and confusion can look like lies if you don't, and one name in particular began to surface more often than the others, not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently, a family acquaintance, someone who knew the routines, who knew the house, who had been seen around often enough to blend into the background. Someone who showed up in old photographs smiling at barbecues and birthdays, the kind of person nobody thinks to question until it's too late, and when detectives finally sat across from him the room felt smaller, the air heavier, because familiarity is unsettling when it turned sour, and his answers were smooth, almost too smooth, details delivered without hesitation, an alibi that fit neatly into place, corroborated by others, a calm demeanor that could be read as innocence or calculation depending on how you looked at it. And when he left the building that day there was no dramatic confrontation, no handcuffs, just a quiet note added to the file, person of interest, and a sense among the team that they had brushed up against something important without being able to grasp it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the case began to show the first signs of strain, leads drying up, tips slowing to a trickle, the public attention drifting to the next headline, the next tragedy. While the victim's family remained frozen in the moment everything stopped, their living room a shrine of photographs and unanswered questions. their days measured in phone calls that never came, and inside the department resources were pulled elsewhere. New cases demanding fresh energy, fresh urgency, until this one was left in the care of a smaller group. Detectives who refused to let it go but who also knew the limits of what they could do without something new, and so the file was thickened and boxed, not closed but paused, evidence sealed, reports indexed, a silent agreement that one day someone would open it again. Years later, when the phrase cold case had become a category rather than a description, the box was still there, heavy with paper and potential, sitting on a shelf like a promise unkept, and when it was finally pulled down, dust rose in the air, the past reasserting itself, and a new generation of investigators began reading from the beginning. Not just skimming but absorbing every word, every decision, every missed opportunity, because distance brings perspective, and what once seemed insignificant can glow with meaning when viewed through the lens of time, and they notice things their predecessors couldn't, patterns that only emerged when you stepped back far enough, the way certain names clustered around certain moments, the way one person's presence overlapped too neatly with key gaps in the timeline, the way a single piece of biological evidence had been logged and then forgotten because there was nothing to compare it to, until now. By the time the call came decades later, the family had learned not to hope. Hope was too dangerous, too sharp, and yet the word still landed like a physical force, DNA match reopened, because science had finally caught up with the patience that had been demanded of them, and the hair sealed away in 1995 had found its voice, matched through a database that didn't exist when the crime was fresh, pointing back toward a name that had never fully left the file, the family friend, the familiar face, and as investigators rebuilt the case piece by piece, they felt the weight of time pressing down. The knowledge that memories fade, witnesses die, alibis harden into myth, and yet the evidence did not care about time. It simply existed, waiting, and when they laid the old photographs next to the new lab reports, the distance between past and present collapsed into a single, terrifying clarity, because what had once been suspicion was now something closer to accusation. And the quiet streets of that Texas town, so sure the story was over, were about to be reminded that some truths refused to stay buried, that heat never really leaves the asphalt, it just waits, and the case that had gone silent was beginning to speak again, louder this time, with a voice sharpened by years of unanswered questions and a science finally ready to listen. The timeline fractures the moment the lab report arrives, not with sirens or headlines but with a quiet, devastating precision. A single sheet of paper sliding across a metal desk, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the room as an analyst clears his throat and says the numbers out loud, percentages and probabilities that sound abstract until they settle like weight on the chest. Because this isn't theory. This is blood. This is skin cells trapped under fingernails for nearly 3 decades. This is a name that has never been spoken in this building before, and the room goes still in the way rooms do when the past finally exhales. Outside, Texas heat presses against the windows, the same heat that baked the asphalt in 1995. The same heat that soaked into the walls of the small house where the crime unfolded, and suddenly time feels less like a straight line and more like a coiled wire pulled tight, vibrating. Back then, the house sat on a quiet street where lawns were trimmed short and porch lights flicked on at dusk, where neighbors waved and dogs barked at passing cars, where nothing ever seemed urgent until it was. The call came in just after midnight, a neighbor reporting an open door, a light still on, a silence that felt wrong. Officers arrived to find the living room untouched, furniture in place, no sign of forced entry, the television dark, the air heavy with the smell of cleaning products and something sharper beneath it, metallic, unmistakable. The bedroom told the rest of the story in fragments. Overturned drawers, a torn bedsheet, a lamp shattered against the wall, and the victim motionless, eyes half open, as if interrupted mid-thought. It looked personal. It looked fast. It looked like someone who knew the layout, who knew exactly where to step and what to take, and more importantly, what to leave behind. In 1995, DNA was a promise more than a tool, a word whispered in courtrooms and police briefings with cautious optimism. Technicians collected what they could, swabs carefully sealed, evidence bags labeled in block letters, then stored away in a refrigerated box with hundreds of others, each one a silent witness waiting for a future that might never come. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, knocked on doors, wrote down statements that contradicted each other in small but maddening ways. One neighbor heard a car, Another heard nothing. A third remembered a man walking quickly down the street but couldn't recall his face. Only the way he moved, shoulders hunched, as if carrying something heavy inside. There were suspects, of course, there always are. A former boyfriend with a temper, a coworker who'd been let go, a drifter passing through town. Alibis were checked, timelines reconstructed, but nothing held. No arrest, no charges. The case slid, slowly, into a file drawer marked unsolved. Years passed. The street changed. Houses were repainted. Children grew up and moved away. The victim's family learned to live with the empty chair at holidays, the phone that never rang with answers. Detectives retired. Evidence boxes gathered dust, labels fading, ink bleeding into cardboard. The case became a name spoken quietly in the department, a cautionary tale about how violence can slip through the cracks, how some nights never end. And then, almost without ceremony, the box was opened again. The decision to reopen the case wasn't dramatic. No confession, no sudden tip. It was policy, a review of cold cases eligible for modern testing, a grant that allowed a small unit to look backward with new eyes. When the evidence was inventoried, the box felt heavier than it should have, as if the years themselves had mass. Swabs were intact, seals unbroken, chain of custody logs complete. Someone, decades earlier, had done their job well enough to make this moment possible. The samples were sent to the lab, placed in machines that didn't exist when the crime happened, machines that could read a history written at the molecular level, extracting identity from what once seemed like noise. The match came back clean. Too clean. Not partial. Not familial. A full profile, entered into a national database that had grown vast and interconnected over the years, lighting up with a hit that made no immediate sense. The name belonged to a man with no criminal record at the time of the murder. No arrests, no fingerprints on file back then, someone who had lived in the victim's orbit without ever appearing on a suspect list. Family friend, a familiar face, someone who had sat at the same table, shared meals, laughed at the same jokes, offered condolences when the worst happened. The shock wasn't just professional, it was existential. How could someone be so close and so invisible at the same time? Detectives pulled everything they could on him, reconstructing a life from documents and memories. In 1995, he was steady, unremarkable, employed, known to neighbors, trusted. He had access. He had reasons to be around without raising alarms. No one remembered him leaving in a hurry that night. No one thought to question his presence because his presence was normal. That realization hit hardest. The idea that familiarity can be the perfect camouflage, that danger doesn't always arrive from the shadows, but sometimes sits on the couch and drinks coffee. When they went to notify the victim's family about the DNA match, the conversation unfolded slowly, carefully, words chosen like glassware in a room full of vibrations. 28 years is a long time to wait for an answer, and answers don't always bring relief. Faces registered disbelief first, then anger, then a hollow kind of understanding as the name sank in. Memories rearranged themselves, small moments reinterpreted under a harsh new light. The man who helped fix a fence. The man who showed up unannounced. The man who was there too often, too easily. Grief shifted shape, becoming something sharper, more focused, and in that focus there was a new kind of pain. Investigators moved with urgency now, aware that time was no longer an abstract enemy but a very real one. Witnesses had aged. Some had died. Others struggled to recall details with the clarity required in court. They revisited the neighborhood, comparing old photos to new facades, trying to orient themselves in a place that had moved on without them. They tracked down former colleagues, old friends, anyone who could place the suspect's movements on the night in question. Stories emerged, hesitant at first, then more confident as people realized the gravity of what was being asked. A late-night phone call remembered. A car scene idling longer than necessary. A mood that seemed off in hindsight. None of it definitive on its own, but together, forming a pattern that felt uncomfortably coherent. The suspect, now older, grayer, living a life that appeared ordinary from the outside, was brought in for questioning. The interview room was small, deliberately plain, designed to strip away distractions. He sat with his hands folded, posture controlled, eyes alert. When confronted with the DNA evidence, his reaction was subtle, a tightening around the mouth, a pause half a second too long. He didn't confess. He didn't explode. He asked questions instead, about procedures, about contamination, about how certain they could be. It was the response of someone who understood systems, who believed in the possibility of doubt. But doubt had limits, and the science was unforgiving. Still, the case wasn't solved yet. A match is powerful, but it isn't a narrative. Prosecutors needed motive, opportunity, a story that made sense to 12 strangers in a jury box. They needed to bridge the gap between molecules and meaning. Detectives dug deeper, uncovering old conflicts, financial stressors, a pattern of behavior that had never crossed into criminality, but now looked different when viewed through the lens of violence. They found inconsistencies in his past statements, small lies that might have seemed harmless once but now stood out like cracks in glass. As the file thickened, the weight of the years pressed in. Every decision felt amplified by the knowledge of what had been lost. Time, trust, the chance for the victim to see justice in her lifetime. The reopened case sent ripples through the community. Old wounds reopening, whispers spreading as people grappled with the idea that the answer had been nearby all along. The phrase cold case took on new meaning, no longer a symbol of defeat but of patience, of the idea that truth can be delayed but not erased. And yet, even with a name, even with DNA, the past resisted closure. There were gaps that could never be filled, moments that would remain speculative, questions that had no witnesses left to answer them. The investigation moved forward under the harsh light of expectation. Every step scrutinized, every delay criticized. For the family, hope and dread coexisted uneasily, each phone call a potential turning point. For the detectives, sleep came hard, minds replaying interviews, evidence layouts, the echo of that lab report landing on the desk. Somewhere between 1995 and now, a line had been crossed, and the act of crossing it had gone unnoticed until science caught up with memory. The reopened case wasn't just about what happened in that house on a hot Texas night. It was about the unsettling truth that the past is never truly past, that it waits patiently in boxes and databases, ready to reassert itself when the conditions are right. As the investigation edged closer to a courtroom, the silence that once defined the case was replaced by a low, constant hum of anticipation. The sense that something long buried was finally pushing toward the surface, demanding to be seen, demanding to be named. The tape recorder keeps running long after the interview room empties, its red light blinking in the silence, because even when the chairs scrape back and the door shuts, this case does not know how to stop talking. It keeps whispering through walls, through years, through the static of old evidence. And in Texas in the summer of 1995, that whisper first took shape as heat shimmering off asphalt, a body found where it should not have been, and a question that settled into the town like dust that never quite washes away. By the time the investigation hit its stride, the shock had already spread from porch to porch, from the sheriff's office to the church parking lot, and then outward into a wider fear, because what happened did not fit, did not resolve, did not end, it only opened a wound that stayed open. The victim's name was spoken carefully then, lowered voices, a life reduced to a few confirmed facts and 1,000 rumors, and the scene itself became a photograph burned into memory. Police tapes sagging in the heat, insects buzzing, officers standing still as if motion might break something fragile. They cataloged what they could see, what they could touch, what they could bag and label, but so much of the truth slipped between their fingers that day, seeping into the ground, into the gaps between witness statements, into the long afternoons when no new leads came in and the phone did not ring. The investigation moved forward anyway, because it had to. Detectives retraced the victim's last known hours, mapping a route through gas stations, convenience stores, quiet roads that seemed harmless in daylight. They knocked on doors where televisions flickered behind curtains and dogs barked at strangers, asking the same questions again and again, hoping repetition would shake loose something solid. People remembered fragments. A car idling too long, a voice raised in anger, a stranger's face that did not belong. Each fragment went into a file, each file into a cabinet, each cabinet into a room already crowded with other cases that also refused to die. Forensics in 1995 did what it could with what it had. Samples were collected, carefully sealed, marked with dates and initials, and sent away with cautious hope. The results came back partial, inconclusive, frustrating. No clean match. No name to attach to the violence. The town watched as weeks turned into months, then years, and the headlines faded, replaced by new tragedies, new distractions. But the family did not forget. They lived inside the absence, inside birthdays that passed without celebration, inside holidays that felt wrong, incomplete, forever altered by a chair that stayed empty. As time went on, the case took on a different weight. It became a cold case not because it lacked heat, but because the heat had nowhere to go. Leads dried up. Witnesses moved away or changed their stories or stopped answering calls. Evidence sat in boxes that smelled faintly of cardboard and dust, stacked in rooms that hummed with fluorescent lights. The detectives who had worked the case aged, retired, passed the files to younger officers who read them with fresh eyes and familiar dread. Every few years, something stirred. A tip from a jailhouse informant, a rumor surfacing online, a theory that promised clarity and delivered nothing. Each time, hope flared and then collapsed, leaving behind a deeper exhaustion. The family learned not to celebrate too early, learned to measure optimism carefully, because disappointment had become too expensive. Then technology changed the rules quietly without fanfare. DNA databases grew, algorithms sharpened, possibilities expanded. What had once been unreadable noise became information waiting to be interpreted. A cold case unit revisited the evidence, pulling boxes that had not been opened in decades, lifting lids with a sense of reverence and fear. Inside were the remnants of 1995. Clothing sealed in plastic, swabs labeled in careful handwriting, reports typed on machines that no longer existed. Each item was handled as if it might still carry a pulse. Samples were sent out again, this time to labs equipped with tools that could see what earlier science could not. The waiting began anew, but this time it felt different, heavier, charged with the knowledge that the answer, if it came, would change everything. When the call finally came, it did not sound dramatic. No music swelled. No announcement echoed through a newsroom. It was just a voice on the other end of a line, steady, professional, delivering a sentence that landed like a blow. A DNA match. After 28 years, a profile had found a name. The shock rippled outward instantly, through the department, through the town, through the family who had learned to brace for bad news and now had to make room for something else entirely. The suspect was not a stranger pulled from the shadows of anonymity. The suspect was someone connected, someone who had once been close enough to be trusted, someone whose presence in the victim's life had not raised alarms at the time. The phrase family friend carried a new, terrible weight, reshaping memories, casting old interactions in a different light. Investigators moved quickly, aware that time, once again, was not on their side. They reconstructed timelines with ruthless precision, aligning the DNA results with travel records, employment histories, statements given long ago and quietly forgotten. Interviews were replayed, transcripts re-examined, pauses and inconsistencies scrutinized with fresh urgency. The suspect's name appeared in the old files, not highlighted, not circled, just there. Another thread among many that had never been pulled hard enough. Now that thread tightened, drawing everything else toward it. The suspect was located, questioned, confronted with evidence that did not exist in 1995, evidence that spoke in probabilities and genetic markers, in matches so rare they bordered on certainty. The room where this confrontation happened was plain, fluorescent lit, designed to strip drama from confession. But the air itself seemed charged with history pressing in from all sides. Outside that room, the family waited, suspended between decades of grief and the terrifying possibility of closure. Reporters gathered at a distance, microphones poised, careful not to intrude too soon, knowing that this was not just a story breaking, but a story reopening, tearing through old wounds. When word spread that the case had been reopened officially, that an arrest was imminent, the town reacted in fragments. Disbelief, anger, a grim satisfaction, and a deeper unease at the realization that the danger had never been abstract, never distant. It had lived among them, attended barbecues, shared jokes, offered help. The idea that the truth could hide in plain sight for nearly 3 decades unsettled something fundamental, eroding the comfort of hindsight. As the legal process began to grind forward, the weight of time made itself felt in every detail. Evidence had to be explained, contextualized, translated across generations of jurors who had grown up in a world very different from 1995. Memories had faded, witnesses aged, some gone entirely, their voices preserved only in brittle recordings and yellowed notes. Defense arguments leaned heavily on that distance, on the gaps and silences that time inevitably creates. Prosecutors leaned on science, on the cold clarity of DNA that did not forget, did not misremember, did not change its story. In the tension between those forces, the case found a new life, one that demanded attention, demanded reckoning. For the family, the reopening was both relief and torment. Answers came with a cost. Knowing who might be responsible did not restore what was lost, did not rewind the years spent waiting, but it did reframe the past, offering a narrative where there had only been chaos. They revisited memories with painful clarity, searching for signs they had missed, moments that now seemed heavy with meaning. Grief shifted shape, making room for anger, for a sense of betrayal that cut almost as deeply as the original loss. The phrase DNA match became shorthand for a miracle and a curse, a technological triumph that arrived decades too late to prevent the damage but just in time to force a reckoning. As the case moved toward its next chapter, the community watched, aware that whatever the outcome, the story would never fully end. The reopening of a cold case is not a neat conclusion, not a final chapter that resolves every question. It is an intrusion of the past into the present, a reminder that time does not erase violence, it only buries it, waiting for the moment when a sealed box cracks open and releases everything trapped inside. In Texas, the summer heat still shimmers off asphalt. The roads still stretch long and quiet, but beneath that familiar surface, something has shifted. A mystery that once seemed destined to remain unsolved has found a voice again, speaking through evidence that endured, through a family that never stopped listening, and through a community forced to confront the unsettling truth that justice, delayed for decades, still has the power to shock when it finally arrives. The road outside the house was still dark when the first patrol car rolled up, headlights washing over the mailbox, the trash cans, the quiet Texas morning that had not yet learned how to wake up. It was 1995, and the sun was minutes away from breaking the horizon, but inside the crime scene time had already stopped. The air carried the stale metallic scent that clung to everything touched by violence, and the officers who stepped inside moved slowly, carefully, as if speed itself might shatter what little sense remained. Photographs were taken, measurements were logged, shoes were covered, gloves snapped tight. Every sound seemed too loud. A refrigerator hum, a radio crackle, a pen scratching paper. Outside, neighbors stood on lawns in robes and slippers, hands over mouths, whispering the same questions that would echo for decades. Who would do this? How could it happen here? And why did nobody hear a thing? Detectives arrived with coffee cups and tired eyes, already bracing themselves for what this case might become. Texas had seen violence before, but every scene carries its own signature, its own cruel logic. They studied the room, the position of the body, the marks that told a story no one wanted to read aloud. The victim's life was suddenly reduced to evidence tags and numbered photos. Yet the house still looked lived in. A chair pulled back slightly from the table. A glass left half full. Ordinary details that made the crime feel personal, invasive, wrong. Someone had crossed a line here, stepped into a private world and left devastation behind. By mid-morning, the news vans arrived. Camera lenses pointed toward the house as if staring long enough might produce answers. Reporters practiced solemn expressions, rehearsed lines about a community in shock, about a family devastated, about police following every lead. Inside the department, those leads were already stacking up on whiteboards and in manila folders. A neighbor who heard a noise, a car seen driving slowly past, a friend who couldn't be reached, a stranger who didn't belong. Each tip felt urgent at first, each one promising clarity, but urgency fades quickly when facts refuse to line up. Interviews began immediately. Family members, shaken and pale, tried to reconstruct the last conversations, the last routines, the last normal moments before everything broke. Detectives asked the same questions again and again, not out of cruelty, but because memory is fragile under grief. Times blurred. Words shifted. Certainty cracked under pressure. Still, patterns emerged, small enough to miss if you weren't looking hard. A routine walk. A usual phone call. A habit that suddenly stopped. Somewhere in those details, investigators believed the truth was hiding. But days passed, then weeks, and the case did not move the way everyone hoped it would. Physical evidence was limited, frustratingly so. Technology in 1995 could only do so much. Samples were collected, sealed, and logged, but the results were inconclusive, partial, unfinished. Not enough to name someone, not enough to charge. The evidence boxes were stacked, labeled, and stored, each one a promise deferred. Detectives chased down alibis, checked phone records, traced movements, but every path seemed to end in the same place. Uncertainty. The pressure grew. Media attention intensified. Headlines used the words everyone had begun to fear. Mystery, unanswered, baffling. Police reassured the public that progress was being made, that no detail was too small, that justice would come. Privately, frustration simmered. Tips slowed. Witnesses grew less certain. Memories faded. The initial shock that had unified the community gave way to anxiety, then to a quiet, uncomfortable acceptance that the case might not resolve quickly. Years slipped by almost without warning. New cases demanded attention. New crimes crowded the desks. The 1995 file was no longer on top, but it was never forgotten. It lived in the background, in the minds of detectives who remembered the smell of that house, the silence of that morning. Occasionally, the box was reopened, a new theory tested, a suspect reconsidered. But every time, the result was the same. Close but not close enough. The victim's family learned how to live with unanswered questions. Birthdays came and went. Holidays passed with an empty chair that no one dared to move. Each anniversary of the crime reopened wounds that never truly healed. They attended meetings with investigators, listened to updates that sounded hopeful but led nowhere. They held on to the idea that somewhere, somehow, the truth still existed, waiting to be uncovered. Hope became quieter over time, but it never disappeared. Inside the evidence room, the boxes aged. Labels yellowed. Handwriting faded. Technology outside those walls changed rapidly, but inside, time felt frozen. DNA testing advanced in leaps and bounds, but not every department had the resources to revisit old cases immediately. Priorities shifted. Budgets tightened. The case waited. It waited through the late 90s, through the turn of the millennium, through a world that moved on while one family remained stuck in 1995. Then, almost without ceremony, something changed. A routine audit. A review of cold cases driven by new grants and new technology. Detectives, younger now, some not even on the force when the crime happened, began opening old boxes with fresh eyes. They read reports without the weight of past assumptions. They asked why certain leads had been dismissed. They noticed inconsistencies that once seemed insignificant. And deep inside one sealed evidence box, preserved carefully and forgotten slowly, lay material that technology had finally caught up to. The lab request was filed quietly. No press release, no promises, just a form, a barcode, and a sample sent off for advanced DNA analysis that had not existed in 1995. Weeks passed. The family was not told. Investigators had learned to be cautious with hope. They had seen it rise and collapse too many times. But when the call came, it was different. The voice on the other end of the line did not sound uncertain. It did not hedge. It delivered facts, clean and undeniable. A genetic profile had been developed. Not partial. Not degraded beyond use. Complete. Silence filled the room after the call ended. Detectives looked at each other, understanding immediately what this meant and what it did not. Profile was not a name. Not yet. But it was a door that had been locked for nearly 3 decades finally cracking open. The profile was entered into databases, compared against millions of records, Each comparison a digital question sent into the void. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning brought the same ritual. Checking for updates, bracing for disappointment. And then, one morning, the system responded. A hit, not a direct suspect at first, but a familial match. A thread, thin but real, connecting the crime scene to a living person somewhere in the present. The room felt suddenly smaller, louder. The past had reached out and touched the present, and there was no ignoring it anymore. Detectives began mapping family trees, tracing relationships backward, forward, sideways, looking for someone who fit the timeline, the geography, the opportunity. The name that emerged was one no one expected. Not a stranger, not a shadowy figure from an old tip line call, but someone connected, someone close, someone who had been there in the margins of the story all along. A person who had attended gatherings, who had offered comfort, who had never been fully scrutinized because familiarity had created a false sense of safety. The realization hit like a physical blow. Trust, once assumed, now felt like a liability. As investigators prepared to move forward, they understood the weight of what they were about to do. This was no longer just about solving a crime. It was about reopening wounds, challenging memories, and confronting a truth that would shock a family and a community that had spent decades believing the worst was behind them. The DNA did not lie. The timeline, once blurred, now sharpened. And somewhere, the person at the center of it all was living a life built on silence, unaware that the sealed box from 1995 had finally spoken. The heat that summer did not just sit on the ground. It pressed down like a lid, sealing every sound, every smell, every secret inside the small Texas town. Asphalt shimmered, cicadas screamed from the trees, and somewhere behind drawn curtains a television murmured afternoon news, its voice barely louder than the hum of box fans. It was the kind of day when time felt slow, heavy, and cruelly ordinary, the kind of day no one remembers clearly until it becomes the last day. By the time the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of bruised orange, a body had already been found, a life already reduced to a chalk outline and a case number, and the town had already begun the long, uneasy habit of pretending it would all be explained soon. The early investigation had moved fast in the way only fresh tragedy can. Uniforms swarmed the scene, radios crackled, yellow tapes snapped in the wind. Detectives bent low over disturbed soil and trampled grass, their notebooks filling with hurried observations, half-formed theories, names scribbled before grief had even settled. A young woman's name echoed through the sheriff's office, spoken carefully, as if saying it too loudly might break something fragile and irreplaceable. Friends were questioned, neighbors pulled from their routines, family members ushered into quiet rooms that smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Everyone had a memory, a version of her last hours, a detail that felt important in the moment and useless a day later. Evidence was gathered with urgency and with the limits of the time. Photographs snapped under harsh flashbulbs, fibers bagged, a bloodstain measured, sketched, debated, a rape kit collected with hands that knew procedure but not the future value of what they held. DNA was a word already floating in scientific journals, but not yet a promise detectives could rely on. Samples were logged, sealed, boxed, and stored, destined for shelves where they would sit in darkness, silent and patient, waiting for a technology that did not yet exist. At the time, they were just items on a list, potential clues that might help, might not, depending on luck. The town demanded answers, and quickly. Vigils were held, candles flickering against the night, faces tight with shock and anger. Headlines spoke of fear, of a predator among them, of doors locked earlier than usual. Tips poured in, a flood of phone calls and whispered rumors. A strange car seen near the road, a man walking too fast, a relationship that seemed wrong in hindsight. Detectives chased each lead with determination, driving long miles under a merciless sun, knocking on doors, sitting across from suspects who stared back with rehearsed calm or raw confusion. Polygraphs were administered, alibis tested, tempers flared, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the trail began to thin. Weeks turned into months. The news vans left. The tape came down. Life, stubborn and indifferent, pushed forward. New cases crowded the desks, new emergencies demanded attention. The unsolved file grew thicker, heavier, its pages marked with highlighter and coffee stains, its cover stamped with a word that felt like a verdict: cold. The victim's family learned a new rhythm of pain, measured not in days but in unanswered questions. They replayed that final morning, searching for missed signs, for moments they could rewind and fix. Every phone call sparked hope. Every silence stretched longer than the last. Years passed, and with them came changes that seemed, at first, unrelated. The town expanded, roads widened, businesses opened and closed. Children grew up hearing the story secondhand, a cautionary tale whispered by parents who still remembered the fear. Detectives retired, their memories of the case fading into anecdotes told over coffee. The evidence boxes remained, stacked in a climate-controlled room, their labels yellowing, their contents unchanged. Technology marched on outside those walls, quietly revolutionizing science while the case slept. When the cold case unit finally reopened the file, it was not because of a confession or a sudden lead, but because of a policy change and a question asked by someone too new to know the case was supposed to be impossible. The detective assigned was younger, trained in a world where DNA was not a theory but a tool, where databases connected states and decades. He read through the file late into the night, feeling the weight of time in every report, every photograph. He saw the gaps, the assumptions, the moments where investigators had been forced to move on without answers. And he saw the evidence list, the items marked collected but never fully tested. The box was retrieved with care, its seal broken after nearly 3 decades. Inside, the contents were exactly as they had been left, preserved in plastic and paper, frozen in a moment no one had been able to solve. The detective held the kit in his hands, aware that it represented both hope and a risk. Testing it could bring answers, but it could also reopen wounds that had never truly healed. Permission was sought, paperwork filed. The family was notified, cautiously, their expectations managed with practiced language that promised effort, not miracles. The sample was sent to a lab equipped with machines that could read what once had been invisible. Days passed, then weeks. The detective checked his email obsessively, his phone vibrating with every notification. When the results finally came back, they did not bring a name at first, only a profile, a sequence of numbers and markers that meant little to anyone outside the field. But that profile was enough. It was uploaded, compared, searched against millions of others. And then, quietly, without ceremony, the system returned a hit. The match did not come from Texas. It came from another state, another life, another crime. A man who had left a trace behind years after the murder, caught in a different investigation. His DNA entered into the system without anyone realizing what else it might unlock. The probability was astronomical, the likelihood of error negligible. The detective stared at the screen, rereading the report, feeling the gravity of what it suggested. A name now hovered where there had been only questions. Breaking the news to the family was done slowly, carefully. The detective sat across from them, the same room, the same tired chairs, but with a different tone. He explained the science, the certainty, the years it had taken to get here. The room filled with a complex silence, a mix of relief and fresh pain. Tears came, not loud, but steady, carrying decades of waiting with them. The idea that the person responsible had lived freely for so long was almost as hard to process as the idea that there might finally be justice. The suspect's life, once examined, revealed unsettling connections. He had been near the area at the time. He had known people who knew the victim. Small details that had seemed insignificant or had never been uncovered before now rearranged themselves into a disturbing pattern. Detectives traveled to speak with him, their questions calm, precise, backed by evidence that did not rely on memory or confession. He listened, his face unreadable, as they explained why they were there, why the past had finally caught up. The arrest, when it came, did not feel triumphant. There were no flashing cameras, no dramatic chases, just handcuffs clicking into place, paperwork signed. A man led away while neighbors watched from behind curtains, just as they had decades earlier. News spread quickly this time, amplified by social media, headlines echoing across the state. A cold case reopened. DNA matched Shock's family after 28 years. The town felt the old fear again, but now it was tangled with something else, something like closure. Yet even with a suspect in custody, the case refused to become simple. Legal challenges emerged, questions about chain of custody, about evidence collected in a different era. Defense attorneys scrutinized every step, every decision made in 1995, looking for weaknesses, for doubt. The family learned that answers did not always come cleanly, that even science had to pass through the imperfect machinery of the justice system. Waiting resumed, though it felt different now, charged with the knowledge that the truth was close, almost within reach. In the quiet moments, the detective returned to the file, reading it again with new eyes. He thought about the first officers on the scene, doing the best they could with what they had. He thought about the years the evidence had spent in darkness, and about how many other boxes like it still waited on shelves across the country. The case was no longer just about one life lost in 1995. It had become a testament to time, to persistence, to the idea that the past does not disappear just because it is inconvenient. As the trial approached, the town braced itself. Old wounds reopened, conversations resumed, memories resurfaced. The victim's name was spoken again, this time not just in mourning, but in testimony, in records, in a narrative that was finally being told all the way through. And beneath it all lingered a sobering thought, heavy and unavoidable. That justice, when it comes late, still carries the weight of every year it was denied, and that even when a cold case warms again, the chill of what happened never fully leaves. The file number is typed in black ink on a manila folder that smells faintly of dust and old paper. A smell that has sat untouched since pagers were still clipped to belts and DNA was a word most detectives only knew from textbooks. And when the folder opens again, decades later, the room goes quiet, not because anyone asks for silence, but because every person present understands what it means when a cold case breathes for the first time in nearly 30 years. The Texas heat presses against the windows like a living thing, but inside the evidence room the air is cold, sterile, unforgiving, and a single latex-gloved hand lifts out an item no one expected to matter anymore. A scrap sealed in plastic, logged in 1995, mislabeled, misfiled, forgotten, the kind of thing that doesn't make headlines until it does. This is where the past stops being distant. This is where it leans forward and speaks. In 1995, the night of the murder was loud with ordinary sounds. A television murmuring in the background. A neighbor's dog barking once and then falling silent. Tires hissing against asphalt as a car passed too fast and disappeared down a residential street that had seen nothing worse than petty thefts and late-night arguments. The victim had plans for the next day. A grocery list on the counter. A voicemail saved on an answering machine that would blink red for weeks after, unheard. The crime scene was chaotic but not cinematic. No dramatic gunshots echoing through the night. Just violence up close, personal, rushed, leaving behind confusion instead of clarity. Detectives worked until dawn, shoes crunching over broken glass, flashlights cutting through shadows, notebooks filling with details that would later feel insufficient. Back then, they collected what they could. Blood samples, fibers, fingerprints smudged beyond recognition. They photographed everything, measured everything, bagged everything, believing that somewhere in the mess was a truth waiting to be pulled free. But science had limits, and so did time. Leads dried up. Witnesses contradicted each other. A composite sketch was pinned to bulletin boards and printed in newspapers, then slowly faded from public memory. The family waited for phone calls that never came, learned to recognize the sound of disappointment in a detective's voice before he even spoke, learned to stop asking how the case was going because the answer never changed. Years passed. The file moved from an active shelf to an archive box. New crimes demanded attention. New victims filled the calendar. The old case became a training example, a cautionary tale, a name mentioned briefly before the conversation shifted forward again. And yet, the evidence stayed. Sealed. Silent. Patient. When technology finally caught up, it didn't arrive with fanfare. No dramatic announcement. No guarantee of answers. Just a quiet decision made by a cold case unit underfunded and overworked but stubborn enough to keep trying. They reopened boxes, cross-checked logs, questioned whether every assumption made in 1995 had been the right one. And then someone noticed the scrap. Not a weapon, not a fingerprint, something smaller. Something that had been dismissed as irrelevant in an era when relevance was defined differently. The lab results didn't come back quickly. Weeks stretched into months. The family wasn't told. They had learned not to hope. But inside the system, something shifted. Numbers aligned. Profiles matched. A name appeared on a screen where there had only ever been blanks. A man who had lived his life in the open, raised children, attended barbecues, shaken hands at funerals. A man who had been present in the victim's world in a way that felt harmless at the time. Family friend. Trusted. Familiar. Invisible in plain sight. The detectives stared at the result longer than they needed to. Experience told them to distrust miracles, to assume error before truth. They ran it again, and again. The match held. The room filled with a weight no one wanted but everyone recognized. This wasn't just a break. This was an earthquake. They pulled old interviews from storage, replayed cassette tapes where voices crackled and hesitated, listened to statements that suddenly sounded different now that the ending was no longer a mystery. Small inconsistencies grew teeth. Moments that had seemed insignificant gained sharp edges. A timeline rewritten not by imagination, but by evidence that had been waiting for the right moment to speak. The knock on the suspect's door didn't happen at night. There was no dramatic arrest under flashing lights. Just two detectives standing in daylight, badges visible, voices calm, asking if they could talk. The man didn't run. He didn't shout. He smiled, confused, and invited them inside. The walls were decorated with photographs of a life lived normally, happily, without any visible stain. It was in that living room, surrounded by proof of decades past, that the past finally arrived to collect its debt. When the family was called in, the words felt unreal. DNA, match, suspect identified. Each sentence landed like a blow, not just because of what it meant, but because of how long it had taken to arrive. Relief and rage tangled together, impossible to separate. Justice, delayed almost beyond recognition, stood at the door asking to be let in. The community reacted the way communities always do when the familiar becomes monstrous. Disbelief first, denial, then the slow, sickening acceptance that the person they thought they knew had been something else all along. Old memories replayed with new soundtracks. Casual interactions took on darker meanings. Trust fractured quietly, in kitchens and on front porches, in conversations that ended too early. The case that had once been a ghost now had a pulse. Media headlines called it a miracle, a triumph of science, a victory for persistence. But inside the investigation there was no celebration. Only the sobering understanding that the truth had been there from the beginning, sealed in plastic, waiting for someone to finally listen. The detectives closed the folder carefully this time, not because the story was over, but because it had finally found its voice, echoing across nearly 3 decades of silence. A reminder that no crime truly disappears, it only waits. The sound that woke the neighborhood was not a scream, not glass breaking, not even the siren that would come later, but the low, steady bark of a dog that would not stop, echoing across a quiet Texas street just before dawn. A sound so ordinary it was ignored, and yet years later witnesses would swear that was the moment everything fractured, the moment a life slipped away unnoticed, the moment a case began its long freeze into silence. By the time patrol cars rolled in and yellow tape cut the morning in half, the house was already heavy with questions, the kind that cling to walls and seep into carpet fibers, the kind that don't fade when the sun comes up. Inside, the air was stale, the television still humming with static, a half-empty glass sweating on the coffee table, and down the hallway, the bedroom door stood ajar like it had been left that way on purpose, like someone wanted what happened inside to be seen, or maybe never found at all. The body lay at an angle that made seasoned officers pause, one arm bent unnaturally, fingers curled as if grasping at something that had already slipped away, the kind of detail that sticks in the mind because it feels deliberate even when no one can explain why. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no obvious chaos, just a quiet violence that suggested familiarity, proximity, trust. This wasn't a random break-in, not a stranger passing through. This was someone who knew the layout of the house, someone who knew the routines, someone who could move through the space without turning on lights. Neighbors would later tell reporters they had heard nothing, seen nothing, that the street had been calm, that nothing seemed out of place, and that collective absence of memory would become the first wall investigators ran into. Detectives moved carefully, gloved hands hovering over surfaces, eyes scanning for anything that felt wrong in a room where almost everything looked normal. A faint smear near the door frame, a single shoe print near the back exit, too partial to match, too soft to leave a clear tread. Fibers collected, bagged, labeled with the kind of optimism that comes from believing every crime leaves behind a signature if you're patient enough to find it. Blood samples were taken, photographs snapped from every angle, measurements recorded in notebooks that would eventually yellow with age. There was DNA, but in 1995, DNA was a promise more than a weapon, a tool still learning how to speak clearly in courtrooms that didn't fully trust it yet. The victim's name would be repeated again and again in the days that followed, printed in block letters on police reports, spoken softly by family members who couldn't quite bring themselves to say it out loud, echoed by news anchors who reduced a life to a headline and a photograph. Friends described someone careful, routine-driven, not reckless, not prone to dangerous associations. Coworkers talked about small habits, the way coffee was always taken the same way, the way the car was parked in the same spot every day. None of it added up to motive. None of it explained why someone would cross the line from knowing to killing. The first interviews were frantic, overlapping, voices competing in cramped rooms as detectives tried to catch inconsistencies before stories had time to harden. Ex-partners, neighbors, coworkers, acquaintances all asked the same questions in slightly different ways. Where were you that night? When did you last see them? Did you notice anything unusual? Most answers were forgettable. Some were confusing. A few raised eyebrows, but nothing stuck. Alibis were thin but unbreakable. Timelines overlapped just enough to blur responsibility. The case began to feel like fog, the kind that moves when you walk into it but never quite clears. As days turned into weeks, the evidence table filled with bags and folders that promised clarity and delivered none. Lab results came back inconclusive, partial, insufficient. The DNA profile was incomplete, degraded, a ghost of genetic material that could not be matched to anyone in the system. Investigators ran it anyway, hopeful, watching the screen as databases returned the same answer again and again. No match. The shoe print didn't correspond to any known suspect. The fibers could have come from anywhere. The smear near the doorframe told a story no one could translate. Each dead end carried its own weight, each one pushing the case further toward the cold. The community reacted in stages, first with fear, then with speculation, and finally with fatigue. Candlelight vigils flickered and died out. Tip lines rang less often. The house sat empty, then changed hands, its history buried under fresh paint and new furniture. While the case file grew thicker and heavier, a physical reminder of failure sitting on a shelf in the department's evidence room. Detectives rotated off. New cases demanded attention. The murder slipped into the background noise of unsolved crimes, mentioned only when anniversaries came around or when a reporter needed a haunting story to fill airtime. Years passed, technology moved forward, and the case stayed exactly where it was, frozen in the mid-90s, sealed inside cardboard boxes and outdated formats. The DNA sample remained, carefully preserved, a quiet witness waiting for a time when it could finally speak clearly. Every so often, someone would reopen the file, flip through the pages, trace the photographs with their eyes, and close it again, frustrated by how little there was to grab onto. It became shorthand inside the department, a reference point for unresolved violence, a name that carried resignation with it. Then, almost 3 decades later, something shifted. Not a confession, not a new witness walking into the station, but a notification from a lab, an alert triggered by technology that did not exist when the murder happened. The DNA profile, once too weak to matter, had been run through a modern database using methods refined over years of trial, error, and quiet breakthroughs. This time, the system didn't return an empty screen. This time, it paused, processed, and produced a hit that made technicians double-check their monitors. The name attached to that match wasn't one detectives expected. It wasn't someone pulled from old suspect lists, not a person whose alibi had been questioned in 1995. It was someone on the periphery, someone who had never been charged with anything remotely violent, someone whose connection to the victim seemed, at first glance, almost incidental. The kind of person who had attended barbecues, shared holidays, exchanged casual conversations without raising suspicion. A person whose DNA should never have been there and yet was. The shock rippled outward, from the lab to the detectives, from the detectives to the prosecutors, and eventually to the family, who received the call with a mix of disbelief and dread. After 28 years of not knowing, of carrying unanswered questions like a permanent ache, they were being told that the case might finally have a face attached to it, that the silence might finally break. But closure, it turned out, was not a clean line from question to answer. It was jagged, emotional, and destabilizing in ways no one had prepared for. Investigators moved carefully, aware that time had a way of distorting memories and complicating accountability. They revisited old interviews, listening to cassette tapes warped by age, reading statements written by hands that might no longer remember the night they described. Small details suddenly looked different under the harsh light of hindsight. A comment once dismissed as irrelevant now felt loaded. A timeline once accepted now seemed suspiciously convenient. The suspect's proximity to the victim, once seen as normal, now felt intimate in a way that made skin crawl. As surveillance teams watched from a distance, as warrants were drafted and redrafted, the case felt alive again, humming with a tension that hadn't existed in decades. Every step forward carried the weight of the past, the knowledge that mistakes made now would not just delay justice but potentially destroy the only chance it had. The DNA was powerful, but it wasn't everything. It needed context, motive, explanation. It needed to tell a story that a jury could believe, that a family could accept, that a community could understand. And in the quiet moments between briefings and paperwork, detectives found themselves thinking about that morning in 1995, about the dog barking in the dark, about the house that looked too normal for what it contained, about how close the truth might have been even then, hiding in plain sight, waiting for science to catch up. The case was no longer frozen, but it wasn't solved either. It was suspended in a fragile state, balanced between revelation and collapse. A reminder that time does not erase violence, it only buries it, and that sometimes, after decades of silence, the past finds a way to knock, demanding to be let back in. The silence that followed the DNA announcement did not sound like relief. It sounded like something heavier, something wrong, the kind of quiet that settles after a gunshot when no one knows who was hit. In Texas, where the summer heat had baked memories into asphalt for nearly 3 decades, the words confirmed match echoed through police radios and family living rooms like a verdict that arrived too late to save anyone. For years, the case had been described with careful distance, a cold case buried under filing cabinets and forgotten promotions. But now it was breathing again, dragging the past into the present with a violence that felt new. The evidence had waited patiently in a paper envelope, fibers and skin cells sealed in plastic, outlasting marriages, careers, funerals. It had waited for technology to catch up, for science to learn how to listen to whispers left behind on a torn sleeve. And when it finally spoke, it named someone no one was ready to hear. Back in 1995, the crime scene had been processed under flickering fluorescent lights by officers who believed they were working against the clock, not against history. The victim's house sat at the edge of a quiet Texas town where neighbors still waved from porches and trusted the dark. That night, the door was ajar. The air inside was wrong, metallic, thick with the smell of blood and cleaning chemicals that never quite erased it. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no alarms triggered. That detail would become a curse, repeated in reports, debated in meetings, misunderstood for years. Whoever came in was expected. Whoever left carried something invisible that would refuse to stay buried. The investigation moved fast at first, or at least it felt that way to those living inside it. Detectives knocked on doors, collected statements, photographed footprints that led nowhere. Suspects appeared and vanished with the speed of rumors. An ex-boyfriend with a temper, a coworker with debts, a stranger seen loitering near the gas station. Each lead flared and died, leaving behind scorched paper and unanswered questions. Evidence was logged, boxed, and shelved as the case cooled, as budgets shifted and priorities changed. The town learned to live around the absence, the empty chair at family dinners, the name spoken softly like it might break something if said too loud. The DNA sample taken in 1995 was routine, almost forgettable at the time. Swabs collected, labeled, stored according to protocol that would later be rewritten. No database existed that could give it a voice. It was potential without purpose, data without context. As years passed, detectives retired, witnesses moved away, memories blurred. The case became a line item in a list of unresolved homicides, something brought up during anniversaries and then carefully put back down. The family aged in real time, carrying grief that learned to coexist with birthdays and holidays, with a justice system that had gone quiet. When the cold case unit reopened the file decades later, it wasn't because of a confession or a new witness. It was because of technology. A grant. A decision made in an office far from the original crime scene. The box was unsealed, the envelope removed, the contents handled with gloves that hadn't existed in 1995. The sample was sent to a lab where machines could read what human eyes never could. When the results came back, they didn't suggest. They didn't hint. They matched. The name that appeared on the screen belonged to someone who had lived a full life in the years since the murder. A job. Family. No criminal record that raised alarms. The kind of person who blended into the background, who attended barbecues and school events, who never expected a knock on the door from detectives holding questions that were older than some of the officers asking them. The shock was immediate and total. This wasn't the stranger from the gas station. This wasn't the obvious suspect. This was someone connected, someone trusted, someone who had been close enough to leave DNA without raising suspicion back when suspicion mattered most. Detectives moved carefully, aware that time had changed the rules. Memories were fragile. Alibis had expired. The suspect denied everything, calmly, confidently, pointing out the decades that had passed, the impossibility of defending against something so old. But DNA does not forget. It does not reinterpret. It sits in silence until asked a question it can finally answer. The match placed him at the scene in a way no witness ever had. It rewrote timelines, reframed old interviews, forced investigators to reread reports with fresh eyes and a growing sense of dread. For the victim's family, the news arrived like an earthquake. They had learned to live with uncertainty, had built routines around the idea that they might never know who did this. Now they knew a name, and the name came with consequences. Relief tangled with rage. Closure felt incomplete, distorted by the years that had been stolen. They asked questions no one could answer. Why now? Why not then? What might have been different if the technology had existed? If the evidence had been tested sooner? If someone had looked twice at a familiar face instead of chasing shadows? The community reacted in fragments. Some refused to believe it, clinging to the image they had always known. Others replayed old interactions in their minds, searching for signs they might have missed. Conversations lowered in volume. Trust thinned. The idea that someone could carry such a secret for so long unsettled people more than the crime itself. It suggested that evil didn't always announce itself, that it could sit quietly at the edge of everyday life, waiting. As prosecutors prepared their case, they faced obstacles that had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with time. Evidence degraded. Witnesses died. Records disappeared. Defense attorneys argued contamination, chain of custody, the reliability of decades-old samples. The courtroom became a battleground between past and present, between scientific certainty and legal doubt. Each hearing reopened wounds, forced the family to relive moments they had spent years trying to survive. And through it all, the DNA remained, stubborn and unchanging. It did not care about arguments or emotions. It simply existed, a molecular fingerprint linking one moment in 1995 to a reckoning nearly 30 years later. The case, once cold, now burned with questions that extended beyond guilt or innocence. It challenged faith in systems designed to protect, to remember, to act in time. It asked what justice means when it arrives late, when the cost has already been paid in years and silence. As the town waited for the next development, for an arrest or a dismissal or something in between, the weight of the reopened case pressed down on everyone involved. This wasn't just about solving a murder. It was about confronting the idea that the past is never truly past, that evidence can outlive denial, that truth can wait patiently for science to catch up. The name revealed by the DNA had cracked the surface of a long-frozen mystery, but beneath it lay deeper fractures, questions that would not be easily sealed again. And somewhere in a lab report, in black ink on white paper, the match remained, unblinking, a reminder that time does not erase what was left behind. It only delays the moment when it demands to be seen. The file does not close the way people expect it to. It never slams shut with a verdict, never settles into the comfort of certainty. It stays ajar, breathing, humming with tension, because even after 28 years, even after the DNA alert flashed across a federal database and lit up a quiet Texas morning, the truth still refuses to sit still. It moves, it slips, it hides in the pauses between what can be proven and what can only be felt. By the time the match comes back, the town has learned how to live with absence. The victim's name is spoken softly now, more memorial than memory, stitched into candlelight vigils and yellowing newspaper clippings. The street where it happened looks smaller than it did in 1995, narrower, less dangerous at first glance. New paint on old houses, new families who don't know the story, who park their cars where patrol units once idled through the night. But the past has a way of punching through fresh layers, and when investigators reopen the box, the air changes. You can feel it. Phones ring differently. Doors close more carefully. People listen harder. The DNA hit is not dramatic at first. No sirens. No press conference. Just a line of text on a screen, a sequence of numbers aligning in a way they never had before. A partial profile recovered from evidence once dismissed as too degraded to matter now points somewhere specific. A name. A man. Still alive. Still breathing. Still claiming innocence. For the family, the call comes on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that tricks you into thinking nothing important is about to happen. The detective's voice is careful, almost rehearsed, heavy with the weight of expectations he knows he cannot promise to fulfill. He says there has been a development. He says it does not mean closure. He says it means movement. Movement is dangerous. It stirs things that have learned how to stay buried. The suspect lives 3 counties away, a quiet address, a history that looks unremarkable unless you know where to look. A few arrests, nothing violent on paper, a job that requires routine predictability. Neighbors describe him as polite, normal, the kind of man who waves but doesn't linger, the kind of man who does not match the monster people have carried in their heads for decades. That contrast hits the family hard. They want someone obvious, someone cinematic, evil with sharp edges. Instead, they are handed ambiguity wrapped in legal language. Investigators drive the miles slowly, replaying the timeline again and again. 1995. Summer heat. A night that should have ended quietly. A body found where it didn't belong. Evidence mishandled, mislabeled, or simply misunderstood in an era before forensic science learned how to listen properly. They remember how quickly attention drifted back then, how tips dried up, how the case slid into a filing cabinet marked unresolved. Now the past has reached out with a fingerprint made of code, and everyone involved knows this may be the last chance to ask the right questions. The interview room has not changed much since the 90s. Same table, same chair, same fluorescent buzz. The suspect sits calmly, hands folded, eyes steady. He has been briefed. He knows why he is here. He knows what DNA means to people who watch crime shows. He also knows what it does not prove on its own. He denies involvement without drama, without anger. He says he doesn't remember that night, says he was in the area sometimes, says Texas is big and memories are small. His lawyer nods at the right moments. The tape keeps rolling. Outside, the community splits quietly down invisible lines. Some believe science does not lie. Others remember how many times science has been wrong, incomplete, misused. Old rumors crawl back into daylight. Names long forgotten are whispered again, pulled from the corners of bars and back porches. People remember things differently now. Timelines shift. Alibis soften. Everyone wants to help or be seen helping or protect something they never thought would be threatened again. The evidence box becomes a character in its own right. Opened, cataloged, re-examined under lights far brighter than the ones it first saw. Fibers, hairs, traces that once meant nothing now carry potential weight. But potential is not proof. Every new test raises as many questions as it answers. Contamination is always a possibility. Chain of custody a minefield. Defense expert circle, ready to dismantle decades of assumption with a single procedural error. The prosecution knows this. They move carefully, almost painfully so. For the family, waiting becomes unbearable. Hope is heavier than grief because it demands energy. It demands belief. They replay the detective's words, searching for hidden promises. They imagine courtrooms, confessions, apologies that never came. Then they imagine disappointment, another door closing, another chapter ending without an ending. The shock of the DNA match has already changed them. Even if nothing else happens, they cannot go back to the way things were before the phone rang. Media attention flares and fades in cycles. Headlines talk about breakthroughs, about long-frozen cases warming under the heat of new technology. Comment sections fill with certainty from strangers who were not there, who do not know the smell of that summer night or the sound of the knock that changed everything. Investigators refuse to oversell. They use words like ongoing and complex and under review. They know how quickly narratives can collapse under scrutiny. As months pass, the pressure builds. The suspect's life constricts under suspicion. Work becomes tense. Friendships thin. He insists he is being punished for coincidence, for living in a world where data can point without explaining how it got there. His legal team prepares for a fight that may never fully materialize, because even with DNA, even with renewed interest, the case is old, scarred by time in ways no lab can repair. There is a moment, late one night, when an investigator sits alone with the file spread open, photographs overlapping like ghosts. He realizes something unsettling. The case no longer belongs to the past. It has invaded the present completely, reshaping lives in real time. Whatever the outcome, there will be damage. Relief for some, rage for others. And still, somewhere at the center, the original act remains unchanged, frozen, waiting to be understood in a way that satisfies both law and memory. The final meeting with the family is quieter than the first. No dramatic announcement, just honesty. The DNA is significant, they are told, but not definitive enough yet. More work is needed. More corroboration. The words land hard. The family nods, exhausted, suspended once again between knowing and not knowing. They have lived here before. What they did not expect was how different it feels after hope has been reintroduced into their bloodstream. As the investigation continues, the town watches from a distance, pretending normalcy while sensing that something fundamental has shifted. The cold case is no longer cold. It is warm to the touch, uncomfortable, alive. And yet it is not solved. Not really. It hangs there, a question mark stretched across decades, daring time to either finish what it started or admit defeat. In Texas, the nights are still hot, still heavy. Somewhere, evidence rests under lock and key, waiting for the next test, the next idea, the next mistake that will either break the mystery open or seal it forever. Until then, the story remains unfinished, echoing through families, through files, through the quiet understanding that sometimes even when science speaks, it does not tell the whole truth.